I was 17 the first time I babysat for the Callahans. They lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, one of those newer developments where all the houses looked the same, but still somehow felt too quiet. I didn't know them well. My mom got me the job through a coworker. All I knew was that they had a 3-year-old daughter named Lily, and a dog that was friendly but big. When I got there around 6:30 p.m., Mrs. Callahan answered the door, already in heels, clutching her purse and keys. Mr. Callahan came behind her, fixing his tie. "Lily's already had dinner. She goes to bed at 8 hours," Mrs. Callahan said quickly, handing me a list of emergency numbers. "She might want a story. She loves her routine. Oh, and don't open the basement door. It sticks, and the dog might run down there. Total nightmare to get him back up." She laughed a little too loud. I smiled politely and nodded. They left without much more than a wave. Lily was easy, sweet, sleepy, and quiet. She cuddled up on the couch with a blanket and watched cartoons until I carried her upstairs at 8. I read her a short story, "Goodnight Moon," and she was out like a light. I came back down, made myself a sandwich, and flopped on the couch with my phone. The dog, a big German shepherd named Duke, lay quietly near the sliding glass door, eyes half closed. Everything felt normal until around 9:30. That's when I heard it. A soft knock. Not at the front door. It came from inside the house. I paused, phone still in my hand. The sound came again. Knock. 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 3 slow taps. From the basement door. Duke's ears perked up and he stood, stiff, alert. He stared at the basement, low growl rumbling from his chest. I stood up too, heart beginning to race. I remembered what Mrs. Callahan said. Don't open the basement door. But someone was knocking. From the other side. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe the sound came from outside? Maybe the laundry machines were on a timer, or pipes, or another. Knock, louder this time. Duke started barking, fur standing up, tail stiff. He lunged at the basement door and scratched at it, snarling. That's when I heard the voice. A man's voice, low, calm, muffled but clear. "Let me out." I froze. My hands shook. My first instinct was to grab Lily and call 911, but something stopped me. What if it was the dad? What if he got locked down there somehow? No, that didn't make sense. Why wouldn't they have told me? Another knock. Then, "I know you can hear me." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Duke went wild, barking, snarling, scratching. I backed, away slowly into the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and dialed Mr. Callahan. He didn't pick up. I called again. Then again. Straight to voicemail. Mrs. Callahan's phone rang twice and went silent. I texted, "Is someone in your basement?" "Someone is knocking and talking." No reply. Just the sound of Duke losing his mind and the man behind the door still knocking, whispering, "Let me out. I'm cold. Please." I grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer. My legs were shaking. I didn't want to go near the door, but I also couldn't leave it. Couldn't leave Lily. I turned off the living room lights. The house went dark, except for the dim light above the stove. I crouched near the stairs, just in case the door opened. It didn't, but the knocking stopped. Duke backed away from the door slowly, whining, tail between his legs, and then silence, the longest, thickest silence I've ever felt. After a few minutes, I slowly crept up the stairs to check on Lily. She was still asleep. Thank God. I stayed with her for the rest of the night, door locked, knife in hand. Never slept. Not for a second. The Callahans got home just after midnight. They were surprised to find me upstairs, sitting on the floor by Lily's bed. "You okay?" Mr. Callahan asked, smiling. I didn't answer at first. I just asked them, "Who's in your basement?" Their faces changed immediately. Mrs. Callahan said. Nobody. Why would you ask that? I told them everything. About the knocking, the voice, the dog barking, the whisper, "Let me out." They went very quiet. Then Mr. Callahan smiled again. Fake, tight. Oh, must have been the boiler. It makes weird noises. You probably scared yourself. First time here and all. They didn't pay me that night. Just said thanks again, and closed the door behind me fast. I never heard from them again. Never saw them again either. A few weeks later, I drove past the house. It was empty. Windows boarded up. For sale sign gone. The whole place looked abandoned. Every once in a while I think about knocking. Just 3 soft taps. To see if anyone knocks back. I was 16 when I agreed to babysit for the Martins. They were a busy couple who worked late shifts, so they needed someone reliable to watch their 2 kids, Emma, who was 5, and Jake, who was 7. Their house was in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a plain 2-story home with a long driveway that stretched from the street to the garage in the back. The driveway was lined by tall bushes, so from the street you couldn't see much of the house. When I arrived just before 6 p.m., Mrs. Martin greeted me at the door with a tired smile and a long list of instructions. "Dinner is on the table," she said. "Emma likes her chicken nuggets and Jake's downstairs watching cartoons. Just keep an eye on them, okay? I'll be home by 11. I nodded, taking the keys to the front door from her. Emma was shy, but sweet. Jake was loud and full of energy, always running from one room to another. I put on a movie for Jake and sat with Emma at the kitchen table while she ate. Everything felt normal for the first hour. Then I heard the doorbell ring. It was 7:30 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the curtain by the door and saw no one on the porch, just the dark street and the dim glow of a street lamp. I shrugged it off, maybe a wrong number, or someone dropping off a package. But then it rang again. This time I opened the door just a crack and looked outside. No one there. I locked the door again and walked back inside. Jake was laughing at the TV, and Emma was coloring on the floor. A few minutes later, I heard something else. A soft crunching noise coming from the driveway. I glanced out the window. At first, I saw nothing. The bushes hid most of the driveway, but then I caught a glimpse of movement behind the tall bushes. Something or someone crouching. My heart beat faster. I grabbed the phone and called Mrs. Martin's cell. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I looked back at the driveway. The figure was gone. I told Jake and Emma it was probably just an animal and to keep watching their movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, just waiting. An hour passed. The house was quiet except for the TV and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard it. A car door closing, slow and deliberate. I looked out the window again. There was a man standing near the back of the driveway. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes. He was staring right at the house. I froze. I wanted to run outside and shout, but I didn't want to leave the kids alone. I locked all the doors again and turned off the TV to make the house quiet. The man took a few slow steps toward the garage, but then he stopped and turned. He looked straight at me through the window. I felt his eyes burning into me. Then he slowly walked back to the street and disappeared into the darkness. I sat down on the couch, hands shaking, trying to calm my breathing. Thought about calling the police, but I was afraid they wouldn't come quickly enough. I called Mrs. Martin one more time. This time she answered, her voice tired but clear. "There's someone outside?" she asked. I told her what I saw. "Stay inside," she said. "Lock every door. Don't open the door for anyone. I'm on my way." I hung up and checked on the kids. Emma was still coloring, oblivious. Jake was now asleep on the couch. I sat by the front window, watching the driveway. The man never came back. About 20 minutes later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Mrs. Martin got out and hurried inside. "Are the kids okay?" she asked, scanning my face. "Yes," I said, voice still shaky. "There was a man watching the house." She nodded slowly, then told me, "Thank you for calling me. I think we need to call the police." She dialed and told them everything. The officers came quickly, flashing their lights around the yard and checking the bushes. They didn't find anyone. Mrs. Martin thanked me and said she would pay me double. I packed my things and left, still feeling nervous. A few days later, I heard from a neighbor that a man had been spotted walking down the street late at night for weeks, just standing in driveways, staring at houses. No one knew who he was or what he wanted. I never babysat for the Martins again. But sometimes, when I'm home alone, I hear a soft crunch outside or catch a shadow just beyond my window. And I wonder if that man is still watching. I was 18 and needed the money, so I took a babysitting job for the Harris family. They had a 10-year-old boy named Max, and I was told to watch him from 5 p.m. until his parents came home around midnight. Their house was an old 2-story, right on the edge of a quiet suburb. The living room had big windows, and you could see the empty street outside clearly. At first, everything was normal. Max was calm and polite. We played video games, ate popcorn, and talked about school. I liked the easy routine. At about 8 p.m., the phone rang. I picked it up. "Hello?" No answer. Just heavy breathing. I said, "Hello? Is someone there?" Still nothing but the sound of breathing. I hung up, feeling a little weird. Max shrugged and went back to his game. The phone rang. Again 10 minutes later. I didn't want to answer, but the ringing was loud and constant. I picked it up. "Hello?" This time a whisper. "I'm watching you." My heart jumped. I stared at Max, but he was too focused on his game to notice. "Who is this?" I asked, voice shaking. Silence. Then the line went dead. I told Max, "I'm going to call your parents." I dialed Mr. Harris's number. No answer. Then Mrs. Harris's. No answer. I felt my chest tighten. The phone rang again. I didn't want to answer, but when I didn't, the ringing just kept coming. I finally picked up. A man's voice, low and calm. "Why did you answer last time? You should hang up, or I'll come inside." I froze. Max looked up, confused. I told him, "Stay here, lock the doors." I ran to the front door and checked the locks. They were locked tight. I looked out the window. No cars, no people. The street was empty. I called 911. The operator stayed on the line while I kept looking outside, waiting for something to happen. The phone rang again. I screamed and threw it across the room. My heart pounded. I sat on the couch, holding Max close. The calls kept coming, over and over. No one ever said anything except that one warning. I don't know how long it lasted. Finally, the calls stopped. At midnight, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Mr. and Mrs. Harris walked in, tired but smiling. I told them everything. They looked serious but said they had no idea who could have made those calls. The next day, the police came by to check the house and the phone line. They said someone had been making prank calls in the neighborhood for weeks. No arrests, but I never forgot that voice. Sometimes, when I'm alone, my phone rings. No one's there, just breathing. And I wonder, was it really a prank, or did someone almost come inside? I was 17 and needed a summer job. Babysitting seemed easy money, so I said yes when a family in my town called asking for help. The Johnsons had a little girl named Lily, who was just 4. They worked late shifts at the hospital and needed someone from 6 p.m. to midnight. When I arrived, the house was quiet and small, with only one floor. The front door creaked a little when I stepped in. I met Lily, a shy kid with bright eyes, who hugged her stuffed bunny tightly. "Mom and Dad will be back late," I told her gently. "We'll watch cartoons and maybe read a book." She smiled and followed me to the living room. The house felt old, like it hadn't been updated in years. The walls were thin, and I could hear every little sound, like the clock ticking, the hum of the fridge, and even the wind tapping the windows. At about 7 p.m., Lily and I were watching her favorite cartoon when I heard a soft knock on the front door. I froze. Maybe it's the neighbors, I thought. But the Johnsons hadn't told me anyone would visit. I quietly went to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. Just empty porch. I shrugged and went back to Lily. A few minutes later, there was a louder knock, this time at the back door. The house had a sliding glass door that led to the small backyard. I walked carefully to the door and peeked outside. No one. The backyard was empty except for a rusty old swing that moved slightly, in the wind. I closed the door quickly and locked it. My heart was beating faster. I told Lily, "It's just the wind, okay?" She looked scared but nodded. I sat down next to her and tried to act normal. Then about 8 p.m., the power went out. The house went dark except for the streetlight shining through the windows. Lily started to cry, held her close and found my phone to use its flashlight. Then I heard it again. A soft tapping on the front door. I told Lily to stay quiet and sat on the floor by the door. The tapping turned into knocking, then into pounding. I could hear muffled voices outside but couldn't understand what they said. I wanted to call the Johnsons, but there was no signal on my phone. The power was out, the door was being hit hard, and I was alone with a scared little girl. I shouted, "Stay away! I'm calling the police!" No answer. I grabbed a kitchen knife, trembling. The knocking stopped suddenly. I stayed by the door, listening. Then, footsteps ran away down the sidewalk. The power came back on. I called the Johnsons from the landline. They told me to call 911. The police arrived after about 20 minutes. They searched the yard but found nothing. The Johnsons thanked me and said the neighbors had reported someone hanging around at night recently. I left as soon as I could. That night, I kept thinking, what if I hadn't locked the doors? What if that person had gotten in? I still get chills remembering Lily's eyes, wide with fear. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I imagine that pounding on the door. And I wonder, what if it happens again? I was 17 when I took a babysitting job for the Martins. Different Martins than the ones from another story, but same quiet neighborhood. This time, I was to watch their 3-year-old daughter, Mia, while her parents went to a dinner party. They said I could stay until 11 p.m. The house was old but cozy, with a small garden out front and big windows that let in lots of light during the day. I arrived just as the sun was setting, casting orange light over the quiet street. Mia was a tiny thing with curly hair and bright eyes. She smiled shyly when I came in and held her favorite stuffed rabbit tight. The parents gave me instructions. Dinner was ready in the fridge, and Mia's bedtime was 8:30 p.m. After that, just read her stories, or let her listen to music until they came home. The first few hours went fine. We ate dinner together, I helped her brush her teeth, and then I read her a few bedtime stories. She fell asleep easily in her crib, clutching the rabbit. I checked the clock. It was just past 9 p.m. I decided to sit in the living room and watch some TV while waiting for the Martins to come home. Suddenly, I heard a soft knocking at the back door. It was weird because the parents hadn't said anyone would come over, and the house was in the middle of nowhere. I peeked through the kitchen window, no one outside. I ignored it and went back to the couch. Then, the knocking came again, louder this time. I got up and opened the back door carefully. No one. Only the cool night air and the empty yard. I closed the door and locked it. I told myself maybe it was an animal or just the wind. But then I heard footsteps on the porch. I turned quickly, heart pounding. Mia was asleep, and I didn't want to wake her. I looked outside again but saw nothing. I sat back down and tried to calm down. About 15 minutes later, I heard the sound of little footsteps inside the house. My heart jumped. I froze. Mia was in her crib. She hadn't moved. I stood up slowly and looked toward the hallway. There, at the end, was a small figure. A child wearing pajamas. I blinked hard. It was too dark to see the face clearly. "Hello?" I whispered, voice shaking. The child didn't answer. It just stood there. I took a step forward. The child turned and slowly walked toward the front door. I called out, "Wait, who are you?" No answer. I followed quietly but carefully. When the child reached the door, I grabbed the doorknob. It was unlocked. My hands trembled. I opened the door and looked outside. No one was there. Closed the door and locked it. I ran back to Mia's room. She was still fast asleep. I checked the windows. All locked. I went to the living room and looked around. No sign of the small child anywhere. I called the Martins. No answer. I felt my stomach twist. Who was that child? And how did they get inside? I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening. The house was silent except for the quiet breathing of Mia. When the Martins came home in the morning, I told them what happened. They looked shocked. "I don't know any other children in the neighborhood," Mrs. Martin said slowly, "and the doors are always locked." The father checked the locks and the windows again. The police came later and said maybe it was a trick of the light or my imagination. But I know what I saw. I never told anyone else. Because what if it wasn't? Imagination? What if that child was still somewhere outside, waiting, watching?